There is a word hidden inside the most recited poem in human history that almost no one has ever been taught to see. It is not hidden in the way that secrets are hidden, buried deliberately, locked away from ordinary people by those who wanted to keep power for themselves. It is hidden in plain sight, the way the most important things always are. Hidden in the grammar, hidden in the specific form of a single Hebrew verb that every translator in every century has rendered in a way that is technically accurate and spiritually catastrophic. One word. And the way that word has been mistranslated, consistently, across languages, across centuries, across every version of the 23rd Psalm you have ever heard read at a funeral or a hospital bedside or a quiet moment of private desperation, is the reason that millions of people have carried this psalm their entire lives and received comfort from it without ever receiving the transformation it was actually built to produce. I am going to show you that word today. I am going to show you what it actually says in the original Hebrew, and I am going to show you why understanding it correctly will change not just how you read this psalm, but how you move through every financial, relational, and spiritual challenge you will face for the rest of your life. I am Rabbi Naomi, 38 years inside the living tradition, my teacher, the man who first showed me this specific word in this specific psalm when I was 22 years old, was a scholar of a generation that is mostly gone now, a man who had survived things I will not name here, and who carried the tradition not as a set of inherited beliefs, but as a living technology he had tested under conditions that most of us will never face. He sat across from me at a wooden table in a study that smelled of old paper and strong tea, and he opened the psalm, and he pointed at the word, and he said, "Everyone reads past this. Do not read past this." What David wrote here is the most radical spiritual statement in the entire Psalter. And when you finally understand what he wrote, you will understand why this psalm has survived 3,000 years and why it will survive 3,000 more. I have been teaching that word for 38 years since that afternoon, and today I am giving it to you. Before we go further, I want you to type the words, "Show me what I missed," in the comments right now, because that is exactly what is about to happen. You have encountered this psalm before, I would wager on that. You have heard it read. You may have read it yourself. You have received something from it. But today you are going to receive what you missed. Type it now. Stay with me through everything that follows, because the teaching builds to a final instruction in the last minutes of this video. That is the difference between receiving this as information and receiving it as a practice that actually changes something. Let me name the problem first. And I want to name it in a way you have not heard it named before. Because the familiar naming of familiar problems is one of the primary reasons people keep having the same conversations about the same obstacles year after year, without the conversation producing any movement. The problem is not that you do not know the psalm. The problem is that you know it the wrong way. And knowing something the wrong way is more dangerous than not knowing it at all. When you do not know something, you are open. When you know it incorrectly, you are closed. Closed in the specific shape of the misunderstanding you are carrying. The 23rd Psalm, as most people have received it, is a psalm of comfort, a psalm of reassurance, a psalm that says, even in the hard places, even in the dark valley, there is a presence with you. That is true. That is in the psalm. But it is the surface of the psalm and not the root of it. And a person who has only the surface of the 23rd Psalm has a beautiful comfort object. They do not have the instrument. They do not have the technology. They do not have what David actually wrote when he sat down in the middle of his own financial and spiritual ruin and reached for the specific understanding that lifted him out of it. They have the translation of what he wrote, and the translation lost the most important word. I want to tell you about the morning I understood this for the first time. I was 22 years old. It was early autumn, and I had been studying for 4 years with the intensity of someone who had found the thing they were born to do, which I had, but who had not yet been shown what the tradition was actually capable of producing in a real life under real pressure. My teacher called me to his study without particular ceremony, the way he always did, and he said he wanted to look at the 23rd Psalm together. I remember thinking this was unusual. We had been working through much more complex text. The 23rd Psalm felt almost too familiar, too elementary for where I thought we were in my training. I remember that thought very clearly because of how thoroughly the next hour dismantled it. He opened his Hebrew text and he went directly to the first verb of the psalm, lo exar, usually translated, I shall not want. He asked me to tell him what I heard in that translation. I said, it is a statement of trust, a declaration that the speaker will not lack what they need. He nodded slowly in the way he nodded when something I said was correct but incomplete. Then he asked me to look at the Hebrew verb form of exar, not what it means, what form it is in. I looked, and for a moment I did not understand what I was seeing. Then I looked again, and the hour that followed changed everything I thought I knew about how spiritual language works and what it is actually designed to do. Exar is not a future tense verb. This is the catastrophe that every translation has smoothed over for reasons I do not entirely understand. Reasons perhaps of theological comfort, of accessibility, of not wanting to confront what the original actually says. Exar is an imperfect aspect verb. In Hebrew grammar, the imperfect aspect does not describe the future. It describes an ongoing, continuous, active process. It does not say, I will not want. It says something far more radical and far more demanding. It says, I am in the active process of not lacking, right now, in this moment, in the valley, in the darkness, not after the valley, not when the shepherd leads me out, in the condition itself. The translation, I shall not want, places the provision in the future, something that will eventually arrive, something the speaker hopes for, something conditional on passing through the difficulty and emerging on the other side. The original says the provision is active now. The word David used means the speaker is already in the state of being provided for, already in the condition of abundance, while simultaneously in the valley of the shadow of death. These two realities are not sequential in the psalm. They are simultaneous. The darkness is real, and the provision is active within the darkness, at the same time, in the same moment. That is what David wrote. That is what every translator has quietly, consistently made slightly less radical by rendering it in the future tense. And that shift of tense, from active, continuous present to eventual future, changes the entire function of the psalm. Let me show you why this matters for your life right now. When you read the psalm as a promise of future provision, I shall not want, meaning eventually things will be fine, you are reading it as a comfort. You are using it to tolerate your current condition by reassuring yourself that something better is coming. This is not nothing. Comfort has real value, but comfort is passive. It is the posture of someone waiting. And the psalm, read correctly, is not a posture of waiting. It is a posture of active, simultaneous reception. The person who has understood the imperfect aspect of exar does not read the psalm and feel comforted about the future. They read the psalm and make a declaration about the present. They are saying, in the condition I am currently in, the valley, the darkness, the financial pressure, the closed door, the depleted account, I am in the active process of not lacking. The provision is not on its way. It is present. It is operating. My limited capacity to perceive it does not alter its operation. And this is not wishful thinking. This is a precise theological and grammatical claim that David encoded into the first complete sentence of the psalm for a specific purpose, to establish from the very first breath of the reading that the speaker is not in the posture of waiting for provision, but in the posture of one who is already receiving it, whether or not the circumstances have yet reflected that reception. This distinction between waiting for provision and being in the active process of receiving provision is the root cause of what separates people who use this psalm as a comfort and never experience the transformation it is capable of from people who use it as the instrument it was built to be and report exactly the kind of movement in their financial and spiritual lives that the tradition has always associated with its correct application. Comfort is a receiving posture. Reception is an active posture. And the Hebrew grammar of the very first verse establishes which posture David intended. Not shall not want. Am in the active, ongoing process of not lacking, now, in this, while this is still happening. I want to press on this one more step because it is important enough to earn the extra moment. The reason the mistranslation has survived so long is not carelessness. The scholars and translators who rendered exar as shall not want were not making a casual error. They were making a theological choice, a choice in the direction of accessibility, in the direction of a version of the text that would sit comfortably with the widest possible audience in the most difficult possible moments. A psalm read at a graveside needs to offer comfort, and the future tense offers comfort. I shall not want. Eventually, in the fullness of time, the loss will be met with provision. That is true. That is in the psalm. But what was traded away in the service of that comfort is the radical demand that David actually made. The demand that the reader not wait. The demand that the reader step into the posture of active reception right now, in the condition of loss, in the condition of lack, in the valley itself, not after the valley, not beyond it, inside it. The translation offered consolation. The original offered a command, and a command is infinitely more powerful than a consolation because a command calls for action, and action is what changes the condition. Here is where I need to challenge you directly, because this teaching lands differently for different people at this point, and I want to address both groups. For some of you, what I have just said has opened something. You have felt something shift in your understanding of a psalm you thought you knew, and that shift is already producing a kind of clarity you were not carrying when you pressed play. If that is you, stay with me for the practice, because the understanding without the practice is insight without activation. For others, what I have just said sounds like a grammatical technicality being inflated into something larger than it deserves. One verb form, one translation choice. How much could it really change? If that is you, I want to say this plainly. The difference between waiting and receiving is not a small difference. It is the difference between a person standing outside a door, hoping it will eventually open, and a person who has understood that the door opens from the inside and has reached for the handle. The grammar is the handle. And you have been standing outside the door long enough. Reach for it. Here is the solution, the practice that activates what I have just taught. It has 3 parts, and it will take you less than 10 minutes each morning. Do not let the brevity mislead you. Brevity is not shallowness. The tradition's most powerful practices are almost always short. It is the precision and the intention that carry the weight, not the duration. The first part is the reorientation. Before you read the psalm, sit still for 60 seconds and choose one specific area of your life where the condition of lacking feels most present right now. Not a general sense of financial anxiety, one specific face, the overdue bill, the stalled negotiation, the income that has not grown. Name it internally with precision. Then, before you read the first word of the psalm, say aloud, "In this specific condition, I am already in the active process of receiving what is needed." Say it in your own voice. not a performance, a declaration made to the condition itself before the reading begins. You are establishing the posture before the instrument is applied. The second part is the reading. Read the entire 23rd Psalm once, slowly, in the Lakash voice, the voice slightly quieter than ordinary speech, the voice of someone speaking at close range to something that matters. As you read each verse, translate it internally, not as future promise, but as present, active reality. The Lord is my shepherd, present tense, right now, in this condition. I am in the active process of not lacking, right now, in this. He causes me to lie down in green pastures. Not eventually, currently, the process is underway. Walk through the entire psalm this way, especially the valley verse, especially there. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, walk through, not around, not after, while still inside. I will fear no evil. In the original, I am in the active process of not fearing. The evil is present, the fear is absent, simultaneously, both at once. Read it as that. The third part is the sealing. After the reading, place your right hand flat on your chest, over the sternum, not the heart as a romantic location, but the physical center of the chest, the seat of what the tradition calls the nephesh, the vital soul. Hold it there for 30 seconds. In those 30 seconds, do not think about the content of the psalm. Simply hold the posture of one who has received, not who will receive, who has received. The reception may not yet be visible in the physical dimension, but the hand on the chest is the physical declaration that the reception has occurred at the level where it always occurs first, the spiritual level, which the physical level will eventually reflect. 30 seconds. Then release. Begin your day from that posture. Do this for 7 consecutive mornings. 7, the number of completion in the tradition, the number that marks a full cycle. In those 7 mornings, you are not building towards something. You are establishing something. You are training the posture of active reception until it becomes the default posture you carry into every financial interaction, every decision, every moment when the circumstances press on you with the language of lack, and your whole trained self knows how to respond. I am in the active process of not lacking, now, in this, while this is still happening. I will tell you what to watch for. Before that, I need to tell you about the test that arrives somewhere in the first 3 mornings, because it will arrive and you need to recognize it when it does. On the 2nd or 3rd morning of the practice, something in your circumstances will press back. A financial problem will appear that feels like evidence that the practice is not working. A number that looks worse. A situation that tightens. Every person I have given this practice to has experienced this, and I have yet to find an exception. This is not the practice failing. This is the moment of maximum spiritual activation, the point at which the posture of active reception you have been establishing is being tested by the circumstances to determine whether you actually hold it or whether you abandon it the moment it costs you something. Do not abandon it. Meet the pressing with the same declaration you made on the first morning. I am in the active process of not lacking. Say it to the pressing directly, then read the psalm, then hold the posture. The pressing breaks by the 4th morning in almost every case, not always dramatically. Sometimes it simply becomes quiet. What follows the quiet is the first movement. On the 3rd or 4th morning, something usually shifts in how the day feels at the start. A quality of groundedness that was not there before. A slight decrease in the reactive anxiety that the morning used to carry. This is not the result yet. This is the instrument beginning to tune. By the 7th morning, most people I have given this practice to report that one specific situation in the area they named in the reorientation has moved, not resolved, moved. the first movement. And from the first movement, with the instrument continuing to be applied, the full resolution follows in its own time and in the form that the tradition always describes as appropriate to the prepared vessel. Not what you asked for exactly, but what you actually needed, arriving in the form you were actually ready to receive. Tell me in the comments, which verse of the 23rd Psalm has always stayed with you, and does it look different to you now after what I have shown you today? I want to know what this teaching meant in you specifically. Which line? What changed when you heard it correctly? I read every comment and I respond to the ones that tell me the teaching reached the layer it was designed for. Next week, I am going to show you a teaching about money and the mouth, the specific words that the tradition identifies as the most financially costly phrases a person can speak. Phrases so ordinary and so socially acceptable that almost no one has ever questioned them, and the specific replacements the sages prescribed for each one. If you want that teaching when it arrives, subscribe to this channel now and turn the notification bell on. I release each teaching once, and I do not repeat them. If what you received today is something someone in your life needs, if there is a person you know who has been carrying this psalm as comfort for years without knowing it was built to be more than comfort, press the like button. That press carries this teaching to someone who is ready for it. Do it with that specific intention, for a specific person. The person whose face comes to your mind right now. May the word you heard today, the word that was always there waiting to be seen, open something in you that has been waiting just as long to be opened. May the next time you read the 23rd Psalm be the first time you read it. May the posture of active reception replace the posture of waiting in every area of your life where the waiting has gone on long enough. I am in the active process of not lacking. Say it tomorrow morning. Say it in the valley. Say it especially in the valley. That is where David wrote it from. That is where it does its deepest work. Shalom.